Now, of course, one of the bigger stories in the world of movies, and one of the sadder stories in the world of movies and movie news the last couple of years, was the tragic incident that happened on the set of the Western movie Rust. And of course, what happened was Alec Baldwin fired off a gun, a prop, quote unquote prop, that ended up being loaded and had a real live bullet in it. And the cinematographer of the film was shot. A couple of people were shot, but the cinematographer ended up dying. Now, recently, of course, you guys will know that Alec Baldwin was officially charged with 2 offenses and faces up to 6.5 years in jail and certain other things as well. Well, a bunch of legal analysis has now been going on, and according to certain legal analysts, they're saying that it looks like Alec Baldwin will probably walk and will probably be found not guilty. I'm not going to say innocent, but will probably be found not guilty. Now, this is coming from the president of a legal association who was also a former federal prosecutor, and that person's name is Nima Rahami. And they broke it down, and here's the problem. All right, let's go over to the classroom for a second. So right now, Alec Baldwin faces 2 charges, okay? So there's 2 particular crimes that he's being charged with. One is involuntary manslaughter. That's the first charge. And because for involuntary manslaughter, he could face up to 18 months in jail and a $5,000 fine. Okay, so that's the first thing that he's charged with. That's what he could be facing for that charge. Now, the more serious charge is something that they are calling a firearm enhancement statute. Now, basically, a version of this law already existed, but this law that he's facing could end up resulting in a 5-year prison sentence. And I think it froze there, Jonathan. You might want to double check that. But it ended up in a 5-year prison sentence. Now, there we go. So altogether, he could be facing 6.5 years and a $5,000 fine. Now, here's the problem. We start with the enhancement, the firearm enhancement statute. The big problem that this president of this legal organization, and actually specifically, Nima is the president of the West Coast Trial Lawyers Association and a former federal prosecutor. Here's the first problem with the firearm enhancement statute that Alec Baldwin's being charged with. It didn't exist when this happened. The law in question that he's being charged with did not exist. And I think October of 2001, I think that's when the accidental shooting happened. So what this former federal prosecutor is saying is, I don't know what they think they're thinking, because you cannot retroactively charge somebody. That's like me saying, hey guys, there's Oreos in the cupboard and everything in the cupboard is free for anybody to take. So Rob goes ahead and pulls out a couple of Oreos and eats them. Now, 2 months from now, I decide, you know what? New rule of the company. No one can take an Oreo cookie, and if you do, you can be fired. Rob, turns out 4 months ago, you took an Oreo cookie. Yeah, but the rules were different. So basically, this one law that they're saying, this one charge he's being charged with, this former federal prosecutor is saying, what the hell are you doing? You can't do this. Now, here's the other thing. There was an older version that was in force when the enhancement statute, when the shooting happened. So let's go back over the classroom for a second. There was an older version of it. The problem is, the older version of the firearm enhancement law was in effect in October of 2021 when the shooting happened. But the law at that time, in order for the law to come into effect, somebody had to be brandishing a weapon with the intent to intimidate or injure a person. So under the old version of the law, clearly Alec Baldwin had no intention of trying to intimidate the cinematographer, nor does anybody believe anywhere that Alec Baldwin intended to harm the cinematographer. So the old version of the law doesn't apply, and you can't charge him with a law that wasn't even in existence when the incident happened. So that's the first part of the problem, and why this lawyer is saying that Alec Baldwin's probably going to walk. Now, what about the whole situation that, the first thing he was charged with, which is involuntary manslaughter. Okay. So that's the one that he still could face up to 18 months in jail, right? Well, here's why this legal expert, former prosecutor, says they think he's going to walk. This is what Nima said. Said the prosecutors claim that Baldwin was distracted during mandatory firearm training and was on his phone. But Rahimi, this is the lawyer, Rahimi argues that Baldwin still did not have an independent duty to personally check the gun when it's other people's jobs to do so. So according to the president of this legal organization, he's saying under the law, there was no legal requirement for Alec Baldwin to be the one that check the gun. He goes on to argue that under legal precedent, if there are other people tasked with that responsibility, and then he is informed that the gun is unloaded, then technically speaking, his legal requirements were met. Now, that's not to say that Alec Baldwin maybe didn't have a moral obligation or something along those lines. But what this lawyer is saying is that under the letter of the law, number one, that Firearm Enhancement Act, throw that out. And then under involuntary manslaughter, he's saying there was no legal requirement for Alec Baldwin in his capacity as an actor in that case to be given that. Now, there's another big problem that this lawyer points out, and that is they are suggesting that the prosecution is celebrity hunting. Because one of the other people who faced legal problems was the assistant director. The assistant director was the one who now, there was the armorer, the armorer's job is to make sure the weapon is safe. The armorer claimed the weapon was now safe, handed it to the assistant director. The assistant director then took it to Alec Baldwin, and the assistant director was the one who informed Alec Baldwin that the gun was, what was the term for it again? Not clean. But there's a word they use.
Cold.
Cold. Thank you. Yes. That the gun was quote unquote cold. That means it's perfectly safe. Here is a safe weapon. Armorer claimed it was safe, gave it to the assistant director. The assistant director claimed it was cold, it was safe, and informed Alec Baldwin that this is a cold weapon. Now, this lawyer is saying that the prosecution, it looks like they're celebrity hunting because the person who actually handed Alec Baldwin the weapon and said that the weapon was cold got a plea bargain deal with no jail time. So this legal analyst is saying, so wait a minute, the one who gave the weapon to Alec Baldwin and informed Alec Baldwin that the weapon was safe, that person's not getting charged with the crime, but the person who received the weapon and was told that the weapon was perfectly safe, that person is being charged with two crimes, one of which was for a law that didn't even exist when it all happened. So what this legal analyst is suggesting is that the prosecution is kind of celebrity hunting a little bit for Alec Baldwin. Now, look, I know everybody has a wide range of opinions about Alec Baldwin and the situation. This was a horrible, horrible, horrible tragedy. And how this will all shake out in court, we're going to have to wait and see. I do think, though, that this legal analyst brings up some really interesting points and factors about what might go on here. So I'm not really sure. Guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of this video, BetterHelp. When you're at your best, you can do great things, but sometimes life gets you bogged down and you may feel overwhelmed or like you're not showing up in the way that you know you can. Working with a therapist can help you get closer to the best version of you because when you're feeling at your best, the challenges that life throws at you don't disappear, but you're more prepared to take on those challenges. Guys, you know I've been saying for a long time that we need to start prioritizing our mental health as much as we do our physical health. When we dedicate ourselves to going to the gym and looking after ourselves, we see that as a great step forward for us physically. Well, it's time for us to start taking care of ourselves mentally as well. So if you're feeling it's time to give therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, flexible, affordable, and entirely online. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. So if you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/Campea today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Campea. But anyway, Rob, this was a really interesting article that we read. What was your takeaway from it?
Well, look, having been on sets, I mean, this is a horrible tragedy, first of all. Loss of life. There's no reason anyone should lose their life on a movie set, ever. That said, it happens. Accidents happen. Alec Baldwin, in my mind, yeah, he was a producer on this movie, but he was not at all at fault at this point. I mean, an actor should never, ever have to ever worry about whether or not a firearm that he's handed or she's handed or they're handed, whoever on set is live, that has a live round in it. There's no business of any kind of live rounds ever being on a movie set. And Alec Baldwin has shot guns in movies back into the 80s. You know, so he's done countless scenes with firearms. And to me, it's just insane that this happened. But like you pointed out, Alec Baldwin's there to act. He's not the safety inspector. He's not somebody that's in charge of making sure that the gun is hot or cold. First of all, there should never be a hot firearm on a set.
Never.
Ever. There's no reason for it at all. And so when he was handed the weapon, and an actor's there to act, you know, he's thinking about his character and what he's got to do and all the blocking. And the fact that this gun went off, I don't see it as his fault at all. Because, like you just pointed out, he was given a weapon that went through two previous hands, the armorer and the first AD. And the first AD is your final line of defense to make sure that whether a stunt's going off, whether something is happening, are we ready? You know, and the first AD should not call rolling until this is all squared away. And I think you're right, John. I think that when they're going celebrity hunting, I think that's exactly what they're doing. You know, going after, because what better for any kind of a DA than to make some kind of a case against a high-profile celebrity? Now,
by the way, I should point out too that this legal analyst mentioned the armorer as well, and this legal analyst says the armorer is in rougher shape. Because they said this. This is a quote from the IndieWire article where Nima said the following. She, the armorer, is in much worse shape, he said. Her only job is to maintain the weapons and make sure they're safe. That is literally her only job.
That is.
And she didn't do it. And so, I mean, I don't know. Look, I've read so many wild conspiracy theories here, Chris, from somebody wanted that person dead and snuck live round. I mean, so at the end of the day, the one thing I really hope that comes out of this is, listen, if they find in court that Alec Baldwin actually did something wrong, and actually, I want there to be justice. If somebody else did, I want there to be justice. One of the things I really hope we find out in this case, and I hope they discover, is how the actual F did a live round of ammunition end up on a set. Like, that's what I'm dying to find out. Anyway, Chris, you hear about this. As always, as outsiders, we have probably 2% of the information.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
We're basing all of our opinions on probably what is 2% of the information. We'll wait to see what happens in the actual court case. But it's a really interesting article here. What did you take away from it?
I mean, the biggest thing here is that hopefully Helena Hutchins' loss of life is not a completely vain thing in which, you know, nothing changes on set from this.
Right.
We've already seen people really, really making big swings with their safety protocols. Because I know a lot of people, too, are saying, well, why wouldn't Alec Baldwin check his gun? And Rob brought this up already. Actors are typically not permitted to mess with the props at all in that regard. We're not supposed to check chambers. We're not supposed to do any of that because that's not our level of training. While we do weapons training and weapons handling, we don't do all of that. That's what the armorer's job is for. The armorer, I know back in January of last year, was trying to sue the ammunitions distributor as well because of some kind of false advertising of what they purchased. That's why these live rounds ended up there, which that also seems a little hinky to me. You know, this is just a perfect storm of everything going wrong. You know, set is a very, very chaotic place. There's so much going on and you're trying to focus on so many different things. And if you don't have everything done to its absolute proper T's crossed, I's dotted kind of way, things can go really, really horribly wrong. And so I hope that Alec Baldwin, should he be, you know, innocent of any wrongdoings here, I hope that that gets proven in court and this gets thrown out. I don't think he had any malicious intent. I really, really don't believe that. Again, that's just from an outsider's perspective, but just from my limited experience of weapons handling on set, I just know that that's something that we're never involved in. And it would be the most horrifying thing to have that happen.
Oh yeah, he's going to need therapy for the rest
Absolutely.
of his life.
And also, a blank is not the same as a live round of ammunition. And when you put a bullet in a gun, you have to take that out and put it in a gun, it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't weigh the same. The fact that somebody put a live round in a gun, I mean, that takes a special kind of stupid.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I could be wrong about this because I'm not familiar with the lingo, but when they say that a weapon is cold, does that not also mean that there's not even a blank in it? I think when a weapon is deemed cold,
It should be
that means
completely
there's
empty.
probably not even supposed to be a blank in it. So, I mean, it just, like, the level of, the number of points of failure in this are astonishing. And again, if we find out whoever is responsible, if we find out Alec Baldwin is responsible, or the armor, or the AD, or somebody else did something nefarious, I hope they get to the bottom of it and find it. I just think these legal, you know me, I have a background in law. I just really like this legal analysis stuff. Anyway, guys, question is for you. What do you think about this? We have a former federal prosecutor saying the case against Alec Baldwin, at least as far as they can tell, is very weak. But I mean, I don't know. Again, we as people probably only know about 2% of the information. Let's see what happens when the court case shakes out. Whatever you guys think about all this, jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts.